6:00, everybody, so we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. The meeting of the Marquette City Planning Commission, Tuesday, February 4th. We'll start with roll call, so Commissioner Primo, you'll start us off, we'll go down the line.
Wayne Primo here.
Kevin Clay here.
Margaret Rayner here.
Christine Hunter here.
Jane Ficken here.
Bella Sutter here.
Steve Murray here.
Alex Wilkinson here.
I'd like to point something out. We don't usually do this as part of the meeting, but there's 5 women in the middle of the group here.
Woohoo!
As of Jane joining the group, there have never been a majority of planning commissioners that were female. So I just wanted to point it out to you that that's a thing that happened.
Wow.
So you're bringing drinks, right? Drinks. Celebrate this historic moment.
Yeah,
That's cool.
that's super cool.
That's true.
I like how we're like,
All together in the middle.
yeah. And then we have this
That's
That was sort of intentional.
Yeah.
Wayne had something.
Are you meeting your DEI requirements?
You better not say that out loud or we're gonna get canceled. Okay, anyway, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Actually, I have yes. I will motion that.
I'll second
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, any corrections or changes to the minutes from the January 7th?
I just have a correction on the name, just to, for roll call, have it say, Hunter.
Great, any other changes? I know, this one kind of streamlined. I remember that meeting being long, but I'm good with it. Okay, any conflicts of interest? I don't think so, but anybody, any conflicts of interest if there's anything related to the code? No, okay, all right, well, we have no public hearings tonight, so are there any citizens wishing to address the commission on any agenda items? Okay. We have no old business, no new business. Are there any citizens wishing to address the commission on any non-agenda items? So anything that's not on the agenda? We don't have any correspondence, reports, or minutes. We do have a quick training. Dave, do you want to tell us a little bit about your nice and detailed article? It sounds like you submitted this to the mining journal.
Yeah, I prepared this article and I submitted it to the mining journal, and they said they will print a version of it. I don't know yet what they're going to cut, but they said they were going to truncate it for space. But I've also submitted it to Marquette Monthly. I thought it was important that we try to do some outreach, and I know a lot of people that participate in the process probably don't know what's become of the whole process, and where things are with the contents of the plan. And so I just wanted to get some information out to the public, and hopefully Marquette Monthly will want to do something with this content. You know, they often they don't really take articles from people like me, like just verbatim. They like to put ideas out to their freelance writers to write articles around. So that's fine if they want to do that with this topic, if they want to collaborate, but I'm not particularly optimistic, because the first time I sent them a concept of this about a month ago, I didn't hear anything. I never even got a courtesy of a reply, and I haven't heard back from them the past few days since I sent them a finished draft of it. But if anybody else has any ideas or you know, has places to circulate it, feel free.
Okay, great. Any questions, comments about this article? I thought it was a really good, thorough.
Go to channel 6.
I am doing the interview with them tomorrow. They did see it
Excellent.
in the agenda and said they wanted to come talk about it, so.
I think that's a much better opportunity to get the word
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. Yeah, so that'll be good.
Commissioner Lori?
I'd just like to commend Dave on a very good article and the effort to inform the public the status of things. It's not something that most of the media pick up on their own, but yet they should probably.
Yeah, very good, yeah. Cool, thanks, Dave. Any other thoughts or comments on it? All right, well then, let's move on to the heart of our meeting today, which is the work session on the land development code amendments. Scroll down, the first one was about landscape performance bonds.
Now, this is something we talked about last year a bit, just kind of bringing it back around. And in green there, it says for large projects. And I guess that's where, if we're gonna start with this, we would, if we're gonna have a performance bond on anything, I guess it would probably make sense that when we start with projects that, the planning commission has to review as part of the project. And in that regard, I would say $10,000 landscaping performance bond is probably about an appropriate amount for that. Could have projects that don't have a lot of landscaping, that are large projects, but $5,000 doesn't go very far. Our engineering department has a $5,000. It's basically a performance bond for right-of-way improvements, and that's, it's not, so it's not in the land development code, but when the engineering office issues permits for work in the right-of-way, they have, the contractors have to agree to this $5,000 performance bond, or what they call a surety bond, in case anything's damaged or not done to their proposed specifications that needs to be changed. And they were able to claim that for the project, the Lakeshore townhouses, Gaines Rock, Lakeshore Boulevard, those townhouses that, and like I said, that doesn't go very far, but it did accomplish some of the work they needed to do with the sidewalk that got undermined by water. That was really going into the wrong areas, coming out of the buildings into the right of way, damaging the sidewalk. So anyway, that's the idea, is to, one thing, a lot of you probably understand that when developers complete projects, landscaping is the last thing they normally get around to doing. And we can and have, last year, we went through and analyzed all the site plans approved since the land development code was approved, and looked at landscaping, and then followed up with several different property owners to make sure they completed the landscaping that wasn't done. There was quite a bit that wasn't done. And we had to work with several property owners, and that is kind of working with a little bit of carrot and a little bit of stick. We've got to be able to, and it's not the best position to have to say, you will pay fines if you don't get this done, but that's the way it is. And they all got done, but we've seen situations where projects have been abandoned, and which are the Gaines Rock Townhomes is the first one. There's been a few of them in the last 10 or 15 years. So that's to cover that kind of situation. And if that's something we want to talk about, or we just want to come back to it at some point, but that's on the table.
Anybody have questions, comments? Commissioner Lori?
I'd like to ask Commissioner Primo how much a $10,000 performance bond costs typically.
Well, I would think most people are gonna have to take $10,000 out of their pocket
And post it.
and post it, because bonds are not easy to get. I mean, we had a guy on the commission that said, oh, no, you can get them overnight, well, it takes years to get bonding. Well, this bond that engineering department's asking for, those are mostly contractors who have bonding.
Mhm.
But I think they'd have to come up with the cash, or the bank's gonna have to give them a letter of this for 10 grand if they can, bank cannot back on it. Which is gonna be backed by their 10 grand anyway. I don't know, I mean, if we're trying to make things affordable, I don't know why we keep sticking stuff in the way. I mean, everything that we do costs money. And therefore, the affordability goes down. A 24-unit apartment building, you're looking at $20,000 to $40,000 in landscaping. So that's over $1,000 a unit. So how do you arrive at they keep talking about reasonable costs, or whatever you want to call it. I mean, it's very difficult with the thousands of rules that are put in the way. And there are thousands, not one or two. Just your permits alone.
Can you give us a sense of like how many other, I was curious about that issue too, and like how many other bonds does the city do on projects? Like, it sounds like engineering has some contractors.
Yeah, that's the only thing I know of. The right of way bonding that they require, and that's kind of required from anybody doing work in the right of way. And usually, when it's a contractor that's doing a curb cut, even if it's just a curb cut, they have to be a bonded contractor, or that person has to put up the money for the bond themselves.
The property owner
If the
would
private
get
property owner
chapter
wants to
something.
do it themselves, they have to provide surety for that bond. So, there's not a lot, but again, with the example of the Gaines Rock townhomes is the people that bought those units had to cover the costs of everything that the developer bailed on, which was hundreds of thousands of dollars.
That was developed.
But this would ensure that they would not have an option essentially.
Well, it'll cover, some of the costs of, like, at least some of the costs. Like, the people at Gaines Rock townhomes are fortunately having a lot of pro bono work being done for them to create a new revised site plan for installing landscaping. But they had to spend, I know that they've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on buying the landscaping materials, having whatever cost. I don't think everything's pro bono, but and other things that weren't covered by the developer. There were other things like with the buildings that weren't completed or that weren't done correctly that had to be repaired or replaced. This is just one thing. We can let this sit and think about it and come back to it.
Well, we think the city probably has some other options, not necessarily bad ones, but, I know if it's an issue within the right of way ordinance, I believe allows the city to correct it and, assess that as a tax lien against the property. I don't know if similar action could be taken for any unfinished improvements on private property or not, but I believe it's likely that there are, because you can't use it. The city has used it in the past for things like if someone wasn't mowing their property and the city had to go in and mow it to bring the ordinance compliance, they can assess that as a tax lien on the property. I would think use a similar method to complete, other things that have been contracted for. It might take some different wording in the permit, so that when you get the permit, you're actually contracting to complete that work. I don't know, and the other thing is just using the court system itself to enforce compliance with permit requirements. So I think there's other options.
Commissioner Freeman?
Well, you have to get a building permit, which is the architectural part. You have to get an electrical permit, you have to get a plumbing permit, you have to get a mechanical permit, you have to get an erosion control permit. And then you might have to get something from the city because you're working in the easement. So, I mean, the firemen inspect houses right now and apartments, because they apparently have enough crew to do it. Why does the city have somebody and have a permit for your landscaping and have somebody come around? Check and see, just like everybody else does. I mean, a few more permits, what's the difference? It's only thousands of dollars.
Well, the landscaping is covered as part of the zoning compliance permit for site plan approval. That's where we have the authority to go back when people don't finish it and require them to finish it under the penalty of paying fines because they didn't comply with the site plan requirements. But that's if you have somebody that is actually capable of being present and taking court. But when you have the LLC that says, oh, we're done, we walked away from the project and good luck taking us to court, it's not likely you'll ever be able to recover anything.
Commissioner McPherson?
The LLC didn't have any fiduciary responsibilities. I would have thought the members of the LLC that would have been an exposure for them.
Yeah, it is, but you know, companies create LLC for every project that they do, and they have limited, it's what is a limited liability company, so they can walk away from a project at a certain point and be able to take the money and run, and maybe they face court date at some point, but.
I would think the owners of the condominiums would certainly be suing them.
Oh, they are, yeah.
Okay, all
But
right,
that's-
that makes more sense.
A multi-year, maybe multi-decade process, maybe they never really get compensation.
It shouldn't be
They're always
decades,
wanting to strike
no.
deals to try to get things settled and, you know, pennies on the dollar kind of a deal to settle something.
Only if their attorney agrees to pennies on the dollar.
Yeah.
Obviously, we have a bargain with me.
Yeah.
I didn't give things away.
Anyway, we shouldn't spend a lot of time on this.
Okay,
There's not
Commissioner
a lot.
Clay, did you have a comment though before we move on?
My question was, how pervasive have people, James Rock was a very visible project,
Yeah.
right, when we got into town, but how frequently were people skipping town and not doing this
Yeah,
landscaping
that's-
as a
that's pretty
percentage
rare.
of process?
Yeah, it's very rare.
I kind of like Commissioner Warrick's suggestion about, is there a way to, I mean, not to put more work on you, Dave, but like, are there other mechanisms that would achieve the goal? And maybe we could look into some alternative mechanisms to kind of address.
I will say the tax lien goes to the property owner when go to, that may not be the developer at that time, and that would be the same, go back to the same issue.
So it's not a huge problem, and it's not real common, but a lot of communities do have performance funds for landscaping, since it's one of those things that it can be hard to get it done, to see it done. Even with the hospital project, they didn't complete the landscaping that they were supposed to within the time frame, and we were lucky that it was still the same people were still there before they transferred it over to the new ownership or whatever, and they made sure at least most of it got done adjacent to the homes on Farragut Avenue and Spring Street. But for 2 or 3 years, they didn't do anything.
Well, I guess this kind of ties both this item and the next one together, in that the issue of how much landscaping we're requiring to begin with is adding to to the issue, I think. And we're talking about maybe reducing it down some, but at this point, we're also hearing that it's impossible to build a project in Marquette without getting government subsidies. And so the city has started subsidizing projects with its general fund and that. I don't see why we can't just reduce the cost of the project as much as possible and say that's the city's contribution to the project. It's a lot more transparent and direct, and instead of channeling money around different ways.
Consistent across the project, I like that.
And so I think, you know, if we reduce it and make that part of the public record, that's intended to take the place of at least some of the subsidy. I know that door's open now, it's gonna be real hard to close. People are gonna continue to expect that, but the other thing is if we're requiring a lot of these to be street trees, whether they're in the right of way or on public property, the city traditionally planted the street trees, at least when I worked here, and budgeted every year for purchase of additional trees. You can't fill the whole city with, in a short period of time with trees, and there's a certain death rate that it's hard to even just keep up with the removals that are required. But I think it makes more sense for the city to pick out the sites they want, the species they want, and put those in on the public right than to require somebody else to do it and then more or less surreptitiously pay them to do it. On their own property. So I'll just leave it at that.
Mr. Creel?
Yeah, I'm just looking at this and, I think this goes back to the 77, kind of. And I think we should have a little variety there. For example, like an apartment building or these condos. Instead of having it stuck up where the plows are gonna throw all the crap up on it and kill them. If we could say, okay, create an area where you can have nice shade trees, maybe a couple of grills or something out, like in the yard, instead of lining it up the way we're doing, just to have a little variety instead of here's what you have to do. And then the other thing I don't understand, you're talking about tree canopy. Why, if you went off the street a little ways, you couldn't use aspen or popple, which is gonna grow fast. And it kind of generates itself. I mean, we had a tree in our front yard that was probably 4 inches around when we moved into the house, not now, but when I was young. And that tree got up to about 8 inches in 40, 50 years. So I don't know what kind of tree canopy you end up with when you wait 40, 50 years. Any shade or anything else.
Okay, so it sounds like we're moving on to the.
I think that sounds like we're already dipped our toes into that section 54.1003, right? So is this kind of what we're starting to talk about? And I was confused. Dave, could you just clarify, is the blue highlights what is proposed or what it?
No, so at the last meeting, the planning commission discussed reducing standards.
From
Those would be the standards if you want to reduce them.
Oh, okay. Thank you. What do folks think about that?
We want to have more housing available. We want to make it as cost effective as we can. And we still want to have some landscaping, so maybe this is a good place in the middle.
Well, explain that this applies to the projects that require site plan review. So multifamily housing might, right? Yeah, it would, I mean, you want multifamily housing. But everything else is commercial. Multifamily is considered.
I was
commercial.
thinking multifamily when I
Yeah.
was considering that.
And these standards have worked out pretty good for the most part, and just let me comment on this part of it. The street tree part of the requirements has been, and it's in here, but we work with the city arborist, and the code language does say that if the site doesn't have room for a street tree, we basically leave that up to the arborist to decide, is this a good place for the street tree? Or is there another location on the site where the street tree might work? So that's been pretty good. It hasn't been, really forced down on anybody that they have to put a street tree in to a location where it's not, doesn't make sense. We've waived the requirement on several sites, I think, because as Arbor said, this tree's not gonna survive there, or it's probably won't keep people healthy there. Or it's just not enough space really for the roots, whatever. But I just say the shrub standard for me seems to be one of the things that could probably be reduced a bit, and I might cut that back by like 5 to 40 or 6 to 40 or something like that for a start. One thing that seems like a pretty reasonable start on that. If you saw some of the site plans we're looking at, they require a lot. And this is just frontage landscaping, but where you have a lot of frontage and there's a lot of shrubs. It seems like some of those sites, they're like, it probably look fine with a little less shrubs. You can imagine some of the sites around with the O'Reilly Auto Parts store, the new Fleet Supply store. They look really nice because they've got lots of vegetation around them. But if you want to cut that back, so shrubs is a good place to start.
Dave, are we hearing complaints from developers that this feels onerous to them, or is this just like something we're kind of chipping away at?
I'm not really hearing complaints per se, because I don't deal with the developer, I deal with the engineer or architect.
Or, I mean, from them or from the client, whatever, people finding this onerous?
Like Dave said, probably the shrubs, because if you look at the numbers up there, 48 shrubs compared to the other stuff. But this is brought because the last meeting when you guys brought this up.
The one thing we have heard is that the caliper size, and that's the other, we already talked about that.
Yeah.
That
That
the
was
tree
really-
caliper sizes
yeah.
could be ratcheted down a bit, and you'd still have, probably the trees will be fine.
6 shrubs per 40 linear feet? I don't know. Yeah, for sure.
When, I guess you don't have the definitions here, but I don't know, are you accepting just a perennial plant as a shrub, or does it have to actually be woody or herbaceous? And the other thing to keep in mind is, a tree requires some maintenance. The shrubs generally require a multiple of that level of maintenance, especially just the planting area around it, keeping it mulched, weeded and such. And you mentioned, the hospital not finishing theirs, but they've got a huge amount of it over there, and it doesn't really seem to be being maintained at all either. So it's becoming an unmowed wheat field more so than a landscape. Yeah.
There's deciduous and evergreen shrubs in the last two rows of that chart. This recommended species. But,
Okay, some of the site plans we see specify just smaller perennials that are really shrubs. Maybe native plants or something, cold flowers or something more along that nature than this.
Sometimes they're throwing that on there, but it doesn't meet any of these categories, they're just adding them.
Okay, that's very exciting. The other question I would have is, do we have any feel for how much of this landscape work is actually being done by local businesses, local contractors, or is it people who are coming into the area to complete this work?
Usually by the time the site plan comes around, I get phone calls from local contractors asking questions about the site plan.
What do people think about this? Do we want to reduce shrubs? Are we happy with just leaving it as it is? What do people want to do right now?
Shrubs are $75 a piece for a medium-sized one. So it's all money. How much do you want to cut? Some are even 80 and 90. I know because the deer keep eating mine and I keep replacing them.
4 per 40 linear feet? What do you guys think?
I'll support more.
Alright, we can write that to the city commission, we've reduced it 50%. You guys, are you guys good with that? Might save a few $100 potentially. But also like, maintain some biodiversity, I like the.
I mean, I'm trying to keep them alive. Talk to the deer.
I know, that's another thing. Can we make it legal to hunt deer in the city? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding, we can't do that, that would be, I don't know. Okay, are we good with that?
Like,
City commission can? I don't want to derail us, but
No, there are things that allow you.
they have no shame in the city, they're like, oh my God. Anyway, so are we good for 4 per 40 linear feet? Yeah. Everybody's good, everybody? Okay, excellent, there we go, we can move on.
do we want to take on the trees at all on that chart? I mean, I guess what I suggest is like for deciduous and evergreen trees, you make that standard 1 per 50 or 60 linear feet or something like that.
That increase the number of trees? By the thing, yeah.
Yes.
Because there's 1 per, then the 1 per 100.
Ornamental, deciduous or evergreens, 1 per 40.
Oh, sorry.
What diameter of the tree requirement?
What we just proposed to reduce that to 1.5.
Okay. I couldn't remember, thank you.
Do we want to change the deciduous or evergreen tree or the ornamental flowering tree standard?
Proposed one
The size of the
One.
lot.
for 50 feet.
So for the deciduous or evergreen tree, just make it 1 per 50 linear feet, there's a proposal. And then we have a proposal is just keep it the same, is that what I'm hearing you saying,
Well,
Commissioner Hunter?
I'm just, like, how big are the lots that we're speaking of, right? So,
There's a range.
Yeah, it's quite a range.
1 tree per
We'll see what I-
That would be the first one.
You know how big this room is?
This room's probably 40 to 50 feet.
Range.
Anybody have a strong opinion?
Don't have it,
Don't have an opinion on it. leave it be, change the top one to 1 per 50 linear feet, but leave the second?
I'm fine with that.
Okay. Y'all good with that? Everybody's good with that? Okay. Are you good? David and Andrew, you guys are happy? Okay, then let's move on.
So we'd like to, jump ahead here, come back. Since Eric, before, these are, planning and zoning specialist. He worked up some proposals with us, but he was the one who pushed us for, changing the fencing requirements. And Eric will kind of lead the discussion for our staff on this. But we'd like to go over these proposals. We'll make sure we can get through all of that while Eric's here at the meeting. And so jump ahead to that.
And I'm just gonna add, Eric does the fence permit, so this is, real world that he's bringing to us, because these are issues that he's seeing.
Yeah, so I do, most in the summertime, I take up permits and now in the winter, but this summer specifically, I dealt with a lot of property owners on corner lots.
And I think we're on page 23 in the packet too.
Am I coming through? So yeah, this summer, I dealt with a lot of property owners on corner lots and those with homes that were set behind their neighbors' houses. And the way the ordinance is currently written, I had to reject a lot of these permits. So we tried to find solutions to make it a little more equal across the city. It wasn't easy to come up with ideas, but the three proposals here, 2, 3, and 4, should hopefully cover that. And we just got some maps that can help make sense of this too, but I guess being unfamiliar with the process, I can give it to you guys because it helps me process it out too, because we're kind of working on this up to today. So the corner lots issue. Currently, corner lots have, as you know, 2 front yards, a side yard, and a rear yard. That is a penalty essentially on property owners because they can only build to a portion of their property. So for example, currently that home to the north has a disproportionate design to the home on the south. Because they cannot build a fence on there, and this is actually a current situation we're dealing with this property owner. This is a violation I have, because I have to do one of these violations. They can't build the fence as they want to, although their neighbor could. I apologize, I'm kind of fighting the cold right now. So the proposal would allow for the neighbor or the property on the corner to build to the front plane of their home on either of the front lines.
With a 6-foot solid.
With a 6-foot solid fence. Currently, they can only build 6-foot tall privacy fence where the blue is, and the yellow is going to be a 4-foot tall picket or open construction fence. So currently, that's the way the language allows for. And you can show the next image. So the proposal would allow for that corner lot to build. Basically, they wouldn't have a side yard for fences only. It doesn't change the language. There's still side yards, rear yards across the city, but the language of the exception on the fence ordinance, they can now have a 6-foot tall fence up to the front plane of their home. This would also, the complication we have with this is that now we have a neighbor who has a disproportionate permission for fences. So there's language that we're still working on, but that's going to be kind of fine. But we're working on finding a way to allow for equal construction on fences and no one's penalized. Now, this came out of one that you may not be familiar with, the Board of Zoning Appeals heard it, but there's a property owner who had to get a variance for a fence that his neighbor could build just by a fence coming along. And this is the situation that this property owner is looking at also. He required a variance to build a fence that his neighbor could just build by right.
It's not reading it for some reason. So here's the current, you're talking about the rear set home?
No, it's a similar conversation. It's just the 2 different kind of yards we're looking at. So similarly, in the rear set property, or as we're going to call it, an interior block property. It's a rear set home and an interior block, so inside the block. This is how it's currently set up. So if you look at these 2 homes in the middle, they can only build a 6-foot tall privacy fence up to the rear of their home, and it's unequal on 2 neighboring lots. Meanwhile, the neighbors on the outside can build 6 foot to the rear of their home. So the proposed language would allow for, it won't be a free-for-all, but they can go to the rear of their neighbor's home, which offers them a little bit more. Now, you can see, let's take 326 as the example. They go from only building to the rear of their home on either side. Now they can, and the driveway is obviously going to be an issue, but like for aesthetics, we can assume that they could build up to that rear of their neighbor's home on either side. Similarly in 330. So it's allowing them to build up to essentially what their neighbors can build by right without having to get a variance. Again, I had full confidence, and so if I'm unclear, I apologize.
And the reason that's important, and the reason we saw a variance for a different property, was because the neighbor was active in their rear yard. However, this person who's rears at home, the front yard is also where they're active, they hardly have a rear yard. So they didn't have any privacy between each other. So they wanted to have the 6 foot fence blocking that area so they can have privacy on their side and the others have privacy on their side.
Can I ask a question? Is this just sort of an example, or because you have the shared driveway, wouldn't that be an issue? Is that a shared driveway?
Yeah, that's just a
This is just an
situation.
example
That's
using
what
the
I was wondering.
locations
Yeah.
of the homes, right?
Yeah, let's pretend the driveway's not.
Yeah,
Okay,
right.
that's,
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if it
Sure.
was an example, because I was like, that doesn't make
Right.
sense at all.
It's the same on between 330 and 334, but this is just a unique situation where we have 2 homes that are set to the rear
Yeah.
side by side. That's not typical in the city.
Commissioner Clay?
I was just gonna say, I sat on that Board of Zoning Appeals meeting, and it was like ridiculous. The neighbor who wanted the fence could purchase the fence and build it, but the property owner had to come through the Board of Zoning Appeals in order to do it. And both parties were in agreement, they both wanted the fence, but they needed to go through the BZA in order to get it built. So,
Precisely.
Yeah, that's exactly what Eric said.
Yeah. And it happened, I'd say 5 or 6 times this past summer. More frequent than you might think, actually.
And that's the example you have, right?
No, we didn't use that
We
as.
don't have it in here, no.
No.
But similar.
It's the
It's
exact
very
same.
similar.
Yep.
So yeah, the corner homes are really the ones that have the least, least flexibility and get really kind of penalized because there are 2 front yards. Each frontage is a front yard. So you can't put a 6 foot fence into your front yard, and then you have a rear yard and side yard. And you can't currently build a fence into a 6 foot high screening fence into your side yard either. So that's where it comes in. So like that example, the other corner example of this one.
The current? So this is the current language right now.
Yeah, so that house, the back, what you're looking at is the opposite side of the driveway. That's considered the rear yard.
Correct. And that is another complication in all this too, is that sometimes setbacks are going to define the rear yard and eliminate their choice. So they would never have the option to build a 6 foot privacy fence where their neighbor might be able to by right, just because of setbacks or other structures on the property.
In like reading the language there on part 5 of the section, just the written text, like what you described in the image, I think the images are really helpful to explain what number 5.
So are you looking at the handout?
Oh, no, I was looking at
Yes,
the.
please don't look at the screen.
Oh.
We changed it, hence the
Oh.
handout.
Yeah, sorry, there's a handout.
Okay, I thought we were looking at.
But item number 5 on there is something we wanted to take some more time to go over before we.
Okay, yeah, because it's kind of, one of the factors of the-
Yeah, we have, yeah.
But even if it's just gonna suggest maybe some kind of image, or something, like, because the image is really.
We will be putting an image in. We're not, even though we're providing these map things, and we won't be using people's properties.
Right.
Just like what I did with, the encroachments, and I provided the examples, we'll do a block example in this area too, so people can see what each item is.
Number 5 is an amendment to previous amendments, and this is a rework that Dave did. We didn't really get to discuss it, but my guess is that this is kind of to clarify because of the changes we're proposing on 2, 3, and 4. For those of you who were on the board maybe 2 years ago, there was a property owner who had a situation that was very similar to this, but because of their neighbor's garage location, they were limited on rear yard. So 5 is just clarifying to go along with 2, 3, and 4.
But the situation we're dealing with this item 5, what that addresses is like a very rare occurrence. So that's not, we'll get back to that, but the bulk of the stuff, the majority of properties in the city would be affected by these changes to items 2, 3, and 4. And we think those are all justifiable changes.
Commissioner Clyde?
I'd just say, I'd like to say, I agree with you, Dave. I think this one is very common sense and it makes sense for us to adopt this. I would support it.
More flexibility for the owners, I agree.
It also keeps side yards protected too. There's no 6-foot side yard except for those corner lots where it's that unique situation. Well, 4 in every block, I guess, but you know, it's not every home, it's just those corner lots are penalized. So side yards are still 4 foot tall generally. Construction generally, except for the exceptions.
Commissioner Freeman?
Yeah, not to do anything with this, but the statement that says a temporary fence can only be up to 6 months. There are situations where the temporary fence will be up like a year, year and a half. In a house that's fire damaged, whatever, they're gonna tear it down. Then it takes another 6, 8 months to build a new one. But you don't want people running in there. I
So
don't
you're saying
think
construction?
a 6 months requirement is, you're talking about any temporary fence, right?
Right, so you're referring to more like the construction fences, or thinking more than 6
There's
months.
many construction projects that go a lot longer than 6 months.
Look at the hospital demolition. And that's been fenced.
We generally don't take those kind of projects into consideration as temporary fences or structures.
I believe this was meant to be for seasonal
Yeah.
fences, right?
The intent was for snow fencing, garden fencing, things like that, that are intended to be temporary for the season.
Clean it up.
Maybe specify. Seems different.
Talking about around the garden, keep the deer out and stuff.
I think so, I guess.
Yeah, there's property owners that put like grown up fencing up in their yards, and neighbors have an issue with them, and I take those calls, so it's intended for those fence types. Not, you're right, the hospital demo is not what I was intending this.
So you guys just a term for that, a different type.
Seasonal fencing rather than temporary,
Yeah,
Seasonal fencing?
rather than temporary fencing.
The rule says 6 months.
No, I know, but that's what we're talking about changing the language so that it clears it up.
So it's not
Yeah,
about
for
construction.
certain situations require it to be up longer, that's all.
so more
For
specific.
the safety of the people, not for any other reason.
Let me jump in. Did we close out on the proposal we had for the 4.6 fences?
I think it's still generally the rate for this one, on the papers.
Okay, I was sure if we actually closed that one to
I think so, right? Is everyone good with that, especially if there's like English?
Yeah. Now we're moving to the.
Just that one little piece about the temporary fencing, I think, the suggestion of maybe not calling it temporary fencing, but seasonal fencing, and maybe even the example. of garden fencing or something to distinguish it from construction.
I guess because the complaints we were getting was snow fencing and things like that.
Yeah, maybe give some examples of clear, different than construction.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Are we good with this section? Can we move back to where we left off? And Eric can go get some rest?
Oh, one more thing, actually. there's-
He's gonna stick around until we get to another item that we're gonna discuss first.
I feel like it's touching the definitions too,
Oh,
since it's just after that. There was some added definitions for screening, for clarity on those, the 4 foot and 6 foot, proposed new definitions that go in Article 2. for screening, just adding definitions for those three amendments to Article 7.
People good with that? Need some definitions? I'm surprised they weren't in there before.
Well, I think it's because there are exceptions where you can have taller than 6 foot for commercial, or there's scenarios where you might have taller than 6 foot.
Yeah, and we require screening between commercial parking lots and residential structures. So there's other than residential screening fences. The screening between the outdoor and all is, on the property, might be 8 feet, it's typically 8 feet.
Or storage,
Outdoor storage might be screened, but a 10-foot fence. I think it can go higher than that, right? Up to 20 feet.
Okay, anybody opposed to having these new definitions added? Okay, I think that's good.
Alrighty, so at the last meeting, we discussed about reducing side yard setbacks for duplex, triplex, 4-unit dwellings, and we added a thought of the rear yard and the L yard, reducing it from 30 feet to 20. At the last meeting, Commissioner Lori asked that we speak to the fire department to look at this, provide comments. They had no issues with the proposal. So in blue are the areas that we're showing, are the zoning districts that we're showing the yellow proposal. So LDR proposing the rear yard from 30 feet to 20. MDR, 2 dwelling units, changing the side yards from 10 and total of 20 to 5 and 13 to match the existing for the 1-unit dwellings. And the same thing for the 3 to 4 dwellings. And then for the 3 to 4, reducing it from 30 to 20. For the rear, and then for multiple family, again, changing the side yards. And then
2 units, just for
1 and 2, yep, and then 3 and 4, and the rear yard. So just kind of matching all of those up. Do you guys have any thoughts on that now? That, are aware the fire department did not have any issues?
Is it 5 feet between the 2 dwellings, or is it 5 feet per each
It's
lot?
a 5-foot side yard minimum, so it's 5 feet from the dwelling to the side lot line.
So 10 between property.
Yes,
Okay, gotcha.
unless you have the existing non-conforming, but yeah.
Well, these require a minimum of 5 on one side and then a maximum or a minimum for both sides, like the multifamily residential 1 to 2 units at the top of the second chart. Has the 5th column says 13 and 20. 20 is the requirement now for both sides have to equal at least 20 feet, but one side needs to be at least 10 feet, which is what's in the other column next to it. So one side could be 10 and one side could be 12, but one side has to be at least 10. Usually there's a driveway on one side, we're talking about residences, so you've got, one side's a little bigger than the other, or quite a bit bigger than the other.
Thank you. Do people like these changes? Discussion, or are you good?
I think from the last time that we talked about it, Commissioner Lori, concern was the fire department, making sure that everybody is safe. And if they come back saying,
And we're still not sure how they're gonna put a ladder up to a 2nd-story window when you only have 5 feet or less.
but it is 10 feet though.
No, if there's a fence or a hedge or something there that they're gonna be confined to 5 feet or less, actually, to get. That's whether it's for fire attack or whether it's for rescue, to get up there and get through that window.
The fire marshal did give us answers and stuff.
That was just an issue, it was over in the mining area where the houses are so close together in Ironwood. It was really difficult to get letters and some of those are even less space.
Commissioner Freeman?
Yeah, my question is, you're talking wall to wall, right?
From the wall to the lot line.
Yeah, so now you got your eve.
Your
I
eve
think
is
Steve
allowed
was
to-
talking about.
Yeah.
So if you had a 2-foot eve on each house,
Yeah,
you got 6 foot left.
the eaves can encroach within 2.5 feet of the property.
6 foot to work in is difficult. I mean, to get up there. But I don't see anything wrong with it, I'm just saying it's
No. As long as the fire-
6 feet, not 10 feet.
And the intent here is to try to scale these setbacks down for these smaller multifamily units so that will encourage more offers more flexibility, encourages hopefully more construction and redevelopment of homes into multifamily.
If that's the intent, why are we not doing that also for the, low density residential? We want to get, incentivize them to build in this.
We've done that already. Because,
Oh, you mean for the side yards?
I don't know what they were 15 years ago, but we went through this with we reduced the lot size requirements and the max, we reduced the lot width requirements, the maximum, or the lot area requirements, the side yards. I think we reduced the side yards for the low density. But one, I guess, with those larger lots, I mean, we don't have any, like, what I would call large lot subdivisions. There are communities that have like minimum 1 acre lot requirements. You have to mention kind of developments. Ours aren't even close to that, but we do want to be, I think we would still be kind of pushing a lot of people's buttons if we take too much away from the larger lot subdivision or subdivisions that exist now in terms of that, changing the development rules too drastically. What are the setbacks for the low density residential?
10 feet or the side yards?
Yeah, that's, I don't know what other people think, but I don't think that's too excessive for these.
I will say, so the LDR is part of the city that was created that met that code at the time. So you're not seeing the non-conforming side yards, they meet the side yard now. But when you're dealing with the MDR, a lot of that's in the core of the city, smaller lots, 50 or less. So that's the idea for them to develop it, have a smaller side yard setbacks.
I'm thinking I'm pretty good with the medium density ones and even the multifamily 1 to 2 units, but I'm still like hung up on like the conversation we had last time about maybe pausing before changing the ones for the bigger multifamily units, just because of fire risk and also just space for that many people on one lot, like having, again, like maybe my neighbors in the multifamily unit where kids use that space and, I don't know, I'm not inclined to reduce for the larger multifamily ones, but sure for the smaller ones, I don't know.
It's kind of where we're at.
Yeah. So maybe not change it for the 3 to 4 units or larger. Kind of keep that 3 to 4 units more in line with the 5 plus almost, or whatever, or just leave it as is, I guess.
Or the MDR and the MFR.
MFR. MFR 3 to.
Oh, so you're still wanting to change it from the 3 to 4 on the MDR?
I think I'm okay with that. I think like, 2 units, like 1 to 2 units, getting them cozy, close to each other, maybe, but like, again, I'm thinking of larger apartment. type.
Yeah, so MDR also has 3 to 4 units. You're talking about, I'm checking.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yes, I guess for both, anything that's more than 2 units.
So you're looking at MDR, okay.
I don't know. Excuse me, I don't know what other people think.
I agree.
Don't have thoughts on this?
I agree with the larger units having, keeping the space larger.
I'm okay with that, but then for the 2 units or less, shrinking the setback. Sounds good.
I don't think the larger units should be.
Like smashed right up next to the house, yeah.
And plus with the eaves, talking about eaves, between 2.5 feet on each side.
Are we all good with that?
Yes.
Okay, and then are you good with the rear yard change for the LDR, 1 to 2?
It's
From
From
30.
30 to 20 to match with the MDR 1 to 2?
So this kind of gets back to Alice's question about shrinking the side yard requirements in that district. What comes to my mind is like, there's the character of those subdivisions are kind of what they are, where a little more space than you find around downtown. And that's what people like about those, they want to have a little more space. So if a new building comes in and it ends up being 5 feet from their side lot line, they might not be too happy, and this is character, this neighborhood's changing in a way that we don't really, that I don't like. But the rear yard is where I think there's probably more room to, people, that doesn't, at least from the street view, it doesn't change the curb appeal or the street view too much of the neighborhood. A little bit less, rear yard would probably be acceptable, especially if somebody wants to go to duplex in one of those, especially bigger duplex. They'd have a little more room to do it without really changing the character of the look of the neighborhood.
Are people okay with shrinking the rear yard setback from 30 to 20 for the low density residential?
Yes.
Yes. Anybody opposed? Okay. Here we go. All right, moving on to section. Oh, are we on the mural already?
At the last meeting, the plan commission made some suggestions. And yellow is the proposed language. And then we've done reading through that. We received a proposed mural at Queen City Running, and it's interesting because it says, "Welcome to the Queen City." And so would it be considered a mural?
Now, this isn't actually, let me explain it, this isn't an actual like proposal.
They just came and asked
An
me.
application that we got. This is, they're going through some, proposed redesigns of the building, and we happen to be, this came up that, oh yeah, look at these pictures we got, this is what's, being proposed, and so with this sign, immediately it was like, okay, this is something we should bring back to the planning commission, because the owner of the building calling it a mural, and I'm looking at it and it doesn't look like a mural. And kind of want to confirm that the issue that jumps out to me about this particular sign is the business name and Queen City on the mural, "Welcome to the Queen City," are the same. So I don't think you can separate those as being commercial content. If it said "Welcome to the Queen City" on the side of Dead River Coffee or the side of any other business, well, you might say, well, that's not a commercial message. but on the side of Queen City running, it seems to me it's a distinctly commercial reference.
So this kind of comes back to my comment I made last meeting was, if a new business was to go into this building with a completely different name, and this mural, call it mural now, was still up, would it still be referencing that company that was there? Or would it be referencing the city itself?
I was kind of wondering the fix would be welcome to Marquette, the Queen City, because not a lot of tourists know that Marquette is titled the Queen City. So I thought maybe that would be a way to differentiate it from that, but.
Well, we could substitute the word Marquette in there for Queen City anyway, and then if it was a business that was Marquette Bobbing Works or Marquette Auto Parts or whatever, you'd have the same dilemma. And we found out in the past we couldn't regulate the content of signs. We had to eliminate political signs from our ordinances because we were saying that was a specific type of sign.
Subject.
But we can regulate, we can distinguish between commercial speech and non-commercial speech. Is the thing, and so.
But again, Queen City is just a synonym in this case for Marquette. And there's a whole lot of businesses in Marquette that have that as a part of their name. Welcome to Marquette or some other mural, an actual mural with the word Marquette in it or something on the side of their building. You're gonna be in the same position you are with this one. I don't think that should meet the definition of a mural in our ordinance. Maybe we need to adjust the definition. But a rectangle that just has words in it, no matter what the words are, I don't think it should meet the definition of a mural. It's a sign.
I'm gonna add to that, if that's possible. Because this is just it's like, welcome to Queen City, and then underneath it says, your slogan here. So this is a prefab sign. This is not a mural. There's no creative process with this whatsoever. That's my feeling on it.
I think it's a sign and not a mural.
It's not a mural.
Yeah, and on the mural on the top of the definition is an original artistic painting or texturing. This is not
It's verbiage.
verbiage. I mean,
Well, you purchased it because your slogan here.
Yeah.
There's nothing original about it.
So that's good, that's why.
I'd like to step away from the design itself, but of what it states, because it's saying, welcome to the Queen City, while the business's name is within that writing. So it could be something just beautiful, mural writing, like the one we see downtown in Marquette, it says Marquette. So stepping away from it looking like a sign. I think the concern here is the business's name is in mural, but the mural is also the name of the city, or a nickname of the city. Is it acceptable?
Like if they made it an artistic painting or texturing, but still had the text of welcome to the Queen City.
Right. The concern is Queen City is the name of the business, but also.
It's Queen City running, isn't it? Queen City running? Okay.
So that's where we have to make a decision on an application. If that was an application, I would say that's, that part of it would have to be approved as a sign. That part of it where it says, where the letters Queen City, however large those are, have to be permitted as a sign. So you can have a mural with a sign within it. I mean, we have several that have commercial content within the mural. And you can do that, but like that's, to me, that is commercial content, but by the fact that the business is Queen City Prime.
Why is this considered commercial content?
Because it's the same name as the business.
It's also the same name or nickname of the city.
Yeah. I'd be willing to, yeah, you got, so if that was an application, I had to make a decision on it, that's a decision I made.
So would they,
Just to clarify, like, would they not be able to do this through the sign ordinance? I'm not as familiar with like.
They can permit the part that says Queen City as a sign, or they could say, hypothetically, they came in with this, or another mural with the Queen City running, saying, welcome to the Queen City. If they don't want to get the permit for the part that says Queen City, and we deny them the right to do that, they could take that to court, and a judge can make a decision on whether or not that's commercial content, but that's, you gotta make a decision. One,
If the font were different for Queen City than it was from the, like, the branding for the company, would that change anything?
That is different from their site, their advertising.
Is it? Okay. I thought you said it was similar, it looked, the picture was
I
similar.
mean, like Andrea said, they have other options. If it said, welcome to Marquette, the Queen City, I'd be a little more inclined to say, well, that's a different message.
And my thought on it, too,
Then-
like, how many people actually know, besides us that live here and that are dorky, that know all this stuff? You know, tourists coming are not gonna know, more likely that we're known as the Queen City, that's our nickname. So I thought if you throw in welcome to Marquette, the Queen City, because you can look at that and they're like, oh, they're saying welcome to their business, you know? 'Cause they might not know the reference.
Then if they put Marquette, Michigan in small letters down below,
Maybe we're getting too caught up in this example. Let's go, can we look at the language that's been promoted and see if we agree with that, like commercial content, because this isn't even a thing, right? They're not even past pages.
It was an example and then you have to provide an answer, but
Commercial content, including logos, images, branding, other lettering, commercial product. Do we like that definition of a mural? Because I think it would exclude this example, right?
I like that it states that it's creative and whatever. I have no problems with that if that's a sign. You know,
Right.
yeah,
You could
and,
do
or they
design.
could do a mural, or they could do some of both, but that's not a mural.
I think that's what we all agree. And I think that language clarifies that.
Yeah. That's why I thought the language fit.
Wayne, you're smiling in a funny way.
Well, I'm just curious, we're talking about the Queen City. Does anybody know why Marquette's called the Queen City?
Isn't it like the second
Maybe
largest-
Steve does.
second largest city or
I used to.
You know why it's called the Queen City?
something? No, somebody
are you
said-
gonna tell us?
What?
You gonna tell us?
I might be wrong, but I believe it's because Marquette burned down and then they required to build with masonry. And they started calling it Queen City's North, but I could be wrong there. I just thought everybody here would know. I mean, they're
I
wrong.
thought it was like the Queen City is like a category of city that's like the second largest. in like
It's got something to do.
I'm from Ohio, and Cincinnati's the Queen City, and it's probably the second largest in the state, I guess.
Yeah, I thought it was something like that. Like a category. of city.
Now we have to find out the correct answer before the
Well,
next.
Dave knows.
well, I think that could be right. It's the second largest city on Lake Superior in the United States.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think it goes back to the construction.
Somebody's gotta Google that.
They required
I
that.
guess we're Googling it.
We're
Sending
Googling it,
emails
why
to
not?
you guys, so we don't have to answer.
Meanwhile, when people are Googling, we can, they can. I think we're good with this language, right? Everybody's got the concept, clarification of what a mural is. Can we find the?
I think the
It
internet says that it's just because of its thriving industries, beautiful buildings, and its status as the largest city in Upper Michigan. So,
well, I looked up Queen Cities for, in general, and it's the largest, city outside of the capital.
Yeah, that's what I thought, like a Lansing.
Calumet was gonna be the capital,
Yeah.
one vote short.
Maybe that's where it came from.
Who is gonna be the
Capital was, yeah, Calumet was one vote short of becoming the capital of the state of Michigan.
Well, Marshall, same thing, downstate.
Yes,
I'm sorry, Marshall downstate was supposed to be the capital.
All right, well, let's
Sorry.
keep moving, that's okay. We need to talk about if we want to add heavy vehicle equipment sales and waivers.
So in the code, I provided you all the light vehicle equipment sales, so you can see what we have already for that. An example of the heavy vehicle equipment sales would be involve indoor, outdoor display of construction equipment like man lifts, forklifts. And, if you'd be agreeable to it, then we can write language to it. I didn't even want to go that far until I knew if you would even want to see this use being added. And if we do want to see this use, what type of zoning districts should this be allowed as permitted or special land use? Like, do you see it more being an industrial or regional commercial, like those bigger ones, or general commercial with regulations?
I would like to see it in several districts, probably the general commercial, regional commercial, and industrial as permitted, and possibly as special use in mixed use. But I think in addition to sales, it should include rental as well. And we're looking at Marquette GMC abandoning that site, and I think it may be a very possible reuse of that site. Well, if the new site they're moving to meets the zoning for light equipment, we have to pursue a change in that.
Say it again?
They're moving across the highway.
Yeah, so that would be an allowed, the light.
It is a light vehicle is allowed on the south, okay. But, I mean, originally, the site that they are on currently was intended to be industrial, it got rezoned to allow that car lot, because car lots weren't allowed in industrial, at the time, and, there's not a whole lot of industrial left up there, other than what Commissioner Primo owns, but, I think it's a suitable spot to try to get a dealership or something.
So add it to permitted use on IN, right, if IN is.
Regional, commercial, and general commercial,
Yeah, I think it's already. Well,
That's light vehicle.
that's light.
Oh, okay.
So I'm just saying those site, those districts plus the.
Yeah,
I don't think it's much different than Airstream trailers just down the road. They might not be construction equipment.
You mean in Michigan?
No, here.
Off of Arizona.
Oh, behind the Airstream.
I agree. I think it makes sense for the ones that aren't listed for both light and heavy. And then industrial, but I don't know about mixed use. Just because again, mixed use, I think the intention was like trying to emphasize housing more, like, things are consistent with the housing, so I feel like maybe hold off on mixed use, but the other districts, I think I'm good with.
Except for mixed use, I like the others.
For both light and heavy.
So which districts, regional, commercial, and industrial?
General commercial.
General commercial, regional commercial, and industrial will be permitted. Which matches, part of the light vehicle. And then add heavy vehicle equipment sales, rental, and display. Are you guys agreeable with that? And then we'll write up some code for that, yeah? All right. You guys all agree with that?
I just have one question before we get to the language on, does the state require a dealer's license for any equipment the same as,
That I don't know. I have to sign off on the vehicles.
Okay, moving right along. Let's see, adding a footnote, okay?
Alrighty. So another fix for corner lots. And we're proposing it for all zoning districts, adding this footnote under the rear yard. So the footnote basically, since a corner lot has two fronts, and they have to pick the side and have to pick the rear. So because they're penalized with having increased setbacks, having two fronts, we're proposing a reduced rear yard setback. So instead of 20 feet or 30 feet, we would have them matching the largest of the required side yard setback. So if we go back up to, so for example, the MDR, right now, they would have to have a 15-foot front yard, 15-foot front yard, minimum 5-foot side yard, and then a 20-foot rear yard. So instead of forcing them to have the 20-foot rear yard, we would allow them to have an 8-foot rear yard, because we're allowing them to have subtract of the largest. So if they have a 5-foot, 13 minus 5 equals 8. So it allows for them to have more buildable space on that small corner lot. And this will bring some of the non-conforming structures into compliance now.
Any thoughts on that one?
Just a question, is it the required maximum, or if they have 6.5 on one side? do they
Then
get 6.5?
subtract that from 13, they
So
can have
they get
6.5.
6.5 on the other side,
Mhm.
so. Okay.
Anybody see any issues with this or clarification?
As long as they still have to meet the open area space, I guess.
Right.
That
That was
that was
required.
6.5 and 6.5.
They still would have to meet Blackstone impervious surface.
Are we good then?
What area are you talking about?
All areas listed.
No, I'm talking what Steve was talking about.
Up here on S, the maximum impervious surface coverage, you can't exceed, that's what Steve was talking about. Even though you're reducing the setbacks, they still can't, depending on the lot size, go over 60% or 50% for it to
You still have the problem of the clear vision triangle. Right.
Those still apply too. right?
Yeah, but
That
you
would
have your
still be
15
front yards.
front yard setback, so the rear yard is not in play there.
Okay, it doesn't seem like anyone,
Well, I'm glad that I appreciate where you're at, because in my head, I was trying to visualize that, so thanks for bringing that up.
okay, are we good then with this? All right.
So that's it.
That's it, hey? So now we're going with fences, we already talked about fences.
We already did them.
All right. Okay, so I think that then, let's see, back to the agenda then, leaves us at commission and staff comments. So we'll just go down the line. Commissioner Freeman, you wanna closing thoughts?
We didn't get through this all, did we?
Yes, we did.
We skipped ahead.
Okay.
Changes were the highlights.
Well, I just, oh, well.
No, go ahead. Yeah, was there something that?
No, I had a question on that. A 50-foot lot, and then you got 6,000 square feet in the other lots, what's, because a 50-foot lot could have 2,500 square feet, depending on what the depth was. I had it circled somewhere here, and then the other one, you're allowing more height, but then you're increasing the side 1 foot for every foot in height you have to come in off the lot line. That reminds me of the stacks out when We Energy was out there. Because industrial lots call for 1 foot for every foot in height, which means they'd have to be 300 feet off the lot line just to put their chimney up.
You're talking about the footnote that allows multifamily to be.
Right,
back
up to 44 feet high.
What's the question?
The question is, if we're trying to allow people to go a little higher.
Yeah.
But we're punishing them by bringing their lot lines in. So they're squeezing their building down. They're squeezing the size of the building.
Which section are you talking about?
It's footnote M.
Right here it says,
For hiding.
maybe increase to 44 feet. But shall we add to the minimum yard setbacks 1 foot for each foot that the building exceeds the 36 feet. So for 7.5 feet, you're coming in 7.5 feet. Is that one lot line or both lot lines?
Well,
All the yard setbacks.
Maybe,
It says minimum yard setbacks.
they're really squeezing things.
Well, so 5+ dwelling buildings have to be on 100-foot lot width with 15,000 square feet of lot area.
I don't remember if we talked about the height for multifamily buildings last time we went through this, but that was, I know there was something in my notes that, it's definitely something that we should consider, so that's a good point, man.
I think we did increase it, right, to be consistent with the mixed use height, because that's 44, and that was kind of.
You got a multi-family building that's, I don't know, what, 500 feet here, that's 120 feet tall. And the front of the building's only 30 feet from the street, maybe. Snowy Heights. Spring and Fifth. Pine Street apartments are stories. So it's not, it's about 100, it's about 100 feet tall. I guess we didn't talk about it last time, and maybe it's in the notes for us to talk about still. But, that was definitely one that I was wanting to talk about as well. Because that's a really serious limitation for developing larger multiple family projects. Not that, that's not the style, like people are probably gonna propose anything like a large Snowberry Heights again anytime soon, but 36.5 feet is really small. Or it's 3 stories. You can't go from 3 stories with a building that size, unless you have that space to make it.
One more story.
Yeah, I mean, you can push the building back, if you have space to push the building back according to that footnote, so many feet for the added height. The Grandview Apartments, that used to be the orphanage building up here, that building got a variance, correct, for after the fact, turn it into apartments.
Mhm.
Because of the height of the building was way over what was allowed by the code. So they were granted a variance for that, and that's a good example of one. I think the building was 70 feet tall. good example of one that maybe we want to see a larger building like that built with, different types of living arrangements on the property. But, certainly downtown, we allow for buildings now that are much bigger than 36.5 feet to have residences.
Just a question about the, I think they call it Black Rock apartments that we included a year or so ago, Main Street. Are those higher than the 36? Because those don't seem like they're very far off property lines back.
I don't think they went higher. I'm check.
No.
Just curious if we're citing examples.
The Black Rock Crossing and the Fallen Bridge.
In partnership with the tribe.
Oh, right.
Is that what they're called?
It's one large 50-unit building. I think it's only 2 stories. I mean, yeah, it's 3. It's only 3. Yeah, it's 3. It doesn't have versus 4, but that's behind. So it comes in like over there. Without any exceptions.
Well, maybe, I mean, if this is a bigger conversation about how to decide, maybe we should table it and come back to it. I don't think we're gonna figure it all out.
Yeah.
Come back
with,
with-
with something written up.
Yeah. Commissioner Clay, we'll just go down the line.
No comments.
No comment.
No comment.
Nothing additional.
No comment. Yeah, so a couple of you, I put the training information from you because I'd like to have you guys sign up for training if you're available. Alex said you signed up for it already, with planning and zoning essentials. So we we have some training money budgeted. If you haven't taken that, and you can do that, please let me know. That would be the planning and zoning essentials on March 19th and 20th, 2 hours each night by Zoom would be the best thing to do if you haven't had either of these, between there's another one on Marquette for managing risk. And that's a good one too, for any planning commission if you haven't had that course. So just let me know, but if you haven't had training yet, if you haven't had this basic training yet, planning and zoning essentials or the citizen planner course offered by Michigan State University Extension, please try to take this and let me know. We'll pay for it. Besides that, we're gonna have a meeting in 2 weeks, again, and that'll be, the presentation, as I indicated in an email, we'll have a presentation, on the Parks and Recreation Draft Master Plan. And then we'll go over some more ODC amendment stuff, so that might be a little bit longer meeting. Okay. Give me more than an hour of ODC amendments. We still have some of this stuff. We're making good progress.
Thank you both for getting this packet organized so nicely, and that really helps guide our conversation, so appreciate your work. I have no comment, just excited about this historic moment with it's the first time really in planning commission history.
I've been here for about 16 years now, and
I think, when I started in late 2010 or early 2011, there were 2 women on planning commission, Sarah Condenzi and, Ashley Koss. But I think there were all men on it at one point after that.
you guys, the student, they're like maximum.
Well, thanks for that historic information. Yeah, we will wrap it up. It's 35.